We're going to get started. I think most people are in the room. Welcome to tonight's STEM Cafe Backyard Wildlife. Our STEM Cafes are brought to you by NIU STEAM in the Center for P20 Engagement at Northern Illinois University. Tonight we are partnering with Dekalb Citizens Environmental Commission to bring you this topic. I'm Dr. Judy Diamond, organizer of the STEM Cafes for the past 8 years and your host for this evening. NIU STEAM refers to science, technology, engineering, art, and math. NIU STEM Cafes are designed to be fun, casual gatherings where adults can eat, drink, and chat with STEM professionals about hot topics and the latest research. We usually hold our STEM Cafes in restaurants and look forward to getting back to the restaurants. Tonight, you will need to provide your own favorite snacks, drinks, and carryouts. In the meantime, a couple of our partner restaurants are offering specials for virtual STEM Cafe participants. Fatty's Pub and Grill in Dekalb is offering a 10% discount to anyone who mentions that they have attended a virtual STEM Cafe. The Open Range Southwest Grill in Sugar Grove, who has partnered with us for both teen cafes and adult cafes, is offering $5 off for anyone that says they have attended our virtual STEM Cafes. For those of you that have not attended our STEM Cafes, our format for this evening is as follows. Our speaker will talk for approximately an hour. During the talk and following the talk, you can send in your questions and comments. We know that there are many experts in the audience as well, so often our attendees add to the discussion with their comments and insight. We will end by 8 p.m. If you experience difficulty hearing during this presentation, you can find a volume control button in the top left-hand corner of your screen that can be adjusted to your particular liking. If you look way up there, you'll see a little microphone. This cafe will be recorded. It will be posted on our website in about a week, as we need to make sure that we have closed captions so that it is accessible to all. Our speaker tonight is John Vanek. John Vanek recently completed his doctorate degree at NIU in biological sciences. He is now Associate Wildlife Biologist and Postdoctoral Research Fellow in the Biological Sciences Department at NIU. John is a wildlife biologist and an urban ecologist. His research focus has been on the ecology and conservation of urban wildlife in the suburbs of Chicago. He knows the habits of critters that prowl, creep, hop, and slither through our backyards at night. He has studied wildlife in places ranging from Nachusa grasslands to the Lake County Forest Reserves. And did I mention skunks in southern Illinois? John worked at the Cooperative Wildlife Research Laboratory at Southern Illinois University studying skunks. He tracked rattlesnakes at Purdue University, and he tracked black bears and red wolves with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He has studied turtles, falcons, and giant salamanders. John has a B.S. in wildlife from SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and an MS degree in biology, studying snakes on a popular tourist beach in New York, as he is a native of Long Island, New York. Tonight, John will talk to us about ways to coexist with urban backyard wildlife. What works, what doesn't work, how to attract backyard wildlife, and how to dissuade unwanted backyard wildlife. Let's hear what John Vanek has to say about balancing the needs of humans, pets, and wildlife. John, would you like to begin?
Sure. How's that? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Before I start, I just wanted to thank my wife. She's wrangling our toddler, and I have our little 1-month-old. So if she starts really crying, my wife's going to come in and rescue me. But thought I'd say that right off the bat. All right. Well, thanks for that great introduction. And a lot of people kind of fumble with the name of the university where I got my bachelor's. It's the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry at Syracuse, and it officially has the longest name of any university in the United States, according to Wikipedia. Um, so for everyone here, thanks for tuning in. We're going to talk today about backyard wildlife. Oh, looks like my wife is coming to the rescue right away. Um, so backyard wildlife is another name for kind of what we call in the biological sciences urban ecology and conservation, which is the study of the wildlife in and around our towns and cities. So before I ever really jump into any of my presentations, I always like to start off by giving everyone a frame of reference for who cares about wildlife and why we should care about wildlife. Um, there are always those of us who are inherently and intrinsically interested in wildlife and conservation. Um, and I don't need to convince any of you people that wildlife is cool and awesome. But there's always people out there who are a little skeptical or maybe consider themselves a little more pragmatic. So I like to give some tangible examples and hard numbers about why we might care about wildlife, aside from how awesome they are intrinsically. So, and usually this is kind of interactive, so I'll just kind of go through this as though you all were answering out loud, but feel free to answer at home. So, who knows how many people attend NFL games in an average year? Actually, buy tickets and go to the stadium. All right, this is where I would kind of goad people into actually raising their hand, but I'll just give you the answer. It's about 17 million people a year actually physically go to NFL games. So probably not this year, but previous years. And now, how many people tuned in on average to a typical Game of Thrones episode at the height of its popularity, so before the last abysmal season? The answer is about 19 million people. So given that context, if I asked you how many people do you think get in their cars, put gas money in, and then drive to a national wildlife refuge on average every year? Do you think it's more? Do you think it's less? Usually the answers are kind of all over, but this number usually surprises a lot of people. About 50 million people actually get in their car and drive to a national wildlife refuge every year. So probably the closest one here to NIU or the Dekalb area is Upper Mississippi National Wildlife Refuge, which is over about an hour and 45-minute drive due west towards Iowa. So a lot of people do that. 50 million people. And then, not everyone is that adventurous, but how many people do you think might actually get in their car and drive to or take public transportation to an AZA accredited zoo and aquarium every year? Again, this is where I'd kind of let people mull about and maybe shout out some answers. Oh, I see some people putting it in the chat. That's great. You can go ahead and do that. So it's 200 million people, which blows my mind. I'm sure that number includes people who are forced to go because maybe they're part of a school group. But it's about 200 million people a year go to a zoo or an aquarium. And I think put together, knowing that people are getting in their cars and going to national wildlife refuges, let alone all our local forest preserves and zoos and aquariums, it shows that people in general care about wildlife, or animals at least. And that in itself should give maybe economically minded people reason to pause. And so people have done of a more sophisticated study than what I just went over. This one researcher, or this group of researchers, actually found that if you add up cost of people filling up their gas tanks or buying bird seed or even buying camouflage and orange to go deer hunting, and you add all that up, it comes out to about $100 billion a year added to our economy. And that's a pretty astounding number. By comparison, the year this study came out, people spent about $80 billion on new cars. So the wildlife economy is actually bigger than the new car economy. And we've all heard about the political debates about bailing out the auto industry or the importance of auto jobs, but you rarely hear people talk about the $100 billion wildlife industry, and that's really because it's kind of out there in the background, just providing benefits, and not everyone is aware of that. And so now I just wanted to give you some more really cool examples of ways that people benefit from wildlife that a lot of folks might not be aware. Again, this is kind of an interactive slide, so I might say, all right, are there any botanists in the audience? Who knows what kind of plant this bat is pollinating? Anyone in the chat want to suggest what this plant is? My wife knows. She whispered it. Ah, Peggy got it. Yeah, it's agave. She's probably heard my spiel before. All right, and now, so why do we like agave generally? Well, that's because agave is what we use to make tequila. And while not every tequila or not every agave that makes tequila is pollinated by bats, there are certain brands and some pretty popular ones that are actually solely pollinated by bats. Bats come to the agave fields and they pollinate that agave. And if we did not have bats out there doing that, those brands of agave would be a lot more expensive, or they might not be economical at all. And for those people who are not tequila connoisseurs, bats also provide about $4 billion a year in pest control services in the United States simply by eating the insects that would otherwise eat the corn. And that was done by some researchers down at Southern Illinois University. It's pretty amazing if you think about the importance of corn in Dekalb County and its cultural significance and the history of Dekalb County. If we didn't have these bats providing free pest control services every year, how much more expensive our corn would be and how much of a harder time our farmers would have it. And again, that's just something that bats do for free. And so these are all kind of like organisms that people are usually not the biggest fans of, but I kind of like them. So this is a species of viper found in Brazil. Does anyone know what benefit vipers provide to humans? Well, there's several of them, but there's one high-profile one. Again, just think to yourself out loud in your lounge chair or wherever you're sitting. All right, it is. We actually use it for a lot of medicine. So people will catch these vipers, and then they extract the venom, and then they're able to search the venom for different chemical compounds, molecular compounds. And these compounds have actually been the inspiration for a lot of really important drugs, such as captopril, which is, I believe, one of 3 ACE inhibitors that is super important for treating heart conditions. And that is directly, a snake is directly responsible for the development of this drug. So if you or one of your loved ones has ever taken this drug, you can personally thank a random snake in Brazil. And now this is kind of a more obscure example, and it's one I love, mostly because of the beautiful images that these scientists have been able to capture. This is a leopard in the city of Mumbai in India. And Mumbai is a rapidly growing city. And what people have found is that there's a pretty healthy population of leopards that lives in the outskirts of Mumbai. So you might think the same way we have raccoons in the outer suburbs of Chicago, they have leopards. And that can be pretty scary. But Mumbai, like many other cities in India, Asia, Africa, they have a big problem with stray dogs. And those stray dogs, as my friends who study epidemiology know, actually are a really serious cause of rabies. We don't think about rabies in the United States because we've been able to control the disease fairly well, because a lot of really great scientists have spent a lot of time and effort, and people have spent a lot of money vaccinating wildlife. Another thing people don't realize, the government actually drops rabies vaccinations from helicopters to make sure in some areas, not everywhere, to make sure that raccoons and skunks don't contract rabies and spread it to our pets and people. But those programs are not everywhere. Um, and so rabies is a big problem. But fortunately, one of the favorite foods of leopards in Mumbai is actually stray dogs. And people captured leopards. They put radio collars on them. They followed them around. They figured out what they were eating. And it turns out they were eating so many stray dogs in Mumbai that they were probably saving about 90 human lives a year that would have otherwise been bitten by a stray dog and contracted rabies, which I think is pretty incredible. In contrast, I think they said about 17 people are mauled by leopards a year in Mumbai, which is obviously terrible, but it's fewer than people that would have otherwise died by rabies. So that was just kind of an obscure example that I always love to talk about because I think it's just so interesting and something that we would never normally connect the dots through. So that's kind of my international segue to talk about how the world is increasingly urban. This is a beautiful map that someone put together, and these blue dots represent areas that are urban in the world. And by urban, there are different definitions, but it usually means there's a lot of people and a lot of pavement or asphalt or otherwise built up areas. And what the different sizes represent is the size of the city, and then the color is the age. And so we can see we have older cities in Europe and northeastern North America, but then we have massive amounts of urbanization happening in Southeast Asia, India, parts of Africa, South America, Mexico, and these are the areas where urban ecologists are increasingly putting their attention because these are the areas where humans are likely having the largest changes across the world. And if we look just at the United States, this orange area is, believe it or not, where 82% of everyone in the entire country lives in the United States. 82% lives in these orange areas. And recently, within the last couple of years, the United States has transitioned from a primarily rural country to a primarily urban country. This has been an ongoing trend, but now we are firmly an urban country. And it's pretty nuts to think that 300 of the 82% of the 300 million people in the United States live in these orange areas, and the other 18% lives in the white areas. Pretty remarkable. And this is one of the reasons that we feel that urban ecology is important because wildlife and nature clearly interacts with humans and provides benefits and some difficulties. And so where humans and nature meet is where we need to be studying things. And so this will be the most amount of text you'll ever see on a slide for this presentation. But I thought this was really beautiful prose, and I just wanted to read it. So urban ecology is the study of ecosystems that include humans living in cities and urbanizing landscapes. It is an emerging interdisciplinary field that aims to understand how human and ecological processes can exist in human-dominated systems. Because of its interdisciplinary nature and unique focus on humans and natural systems, the term urban ecology has been used variously to describe the study of humans in cities, the nature of nature in cities, and the coupled relationship between humans and nature. Each of these research areas is contributing to our understanding of urban ecosystems, and each must be fully understood to grasp the science of urban ecology. I feel that usually scientists are a lot less poetic and more boring in their writing, so I just wanted to highlight these authors who put those two paragraphs together. But I think it really encapsulates the whole field of urban ecology quite well. All right. So I just mentioned ecological processes, and so I just wanted to give you an example of some of these, of what that means. So everyone hopefully can identify these critters, right? These are raccoons. So we know that urbanization can influence the abundance of wildlife. Either increase it dramatically, as in the case of raccoons, or decrease it dramatically in the case of, say, rhinos or wolves. But this is a really great example of a species that has been able to adapt to what humans do and fully take advantage of it. And within the last 30 years, raccoon populations have skyrocketed in cities across the not only the United States where they're native, but the world. They've been introduced in Europe and Asia, and there are places, I don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's a city in Germany where someone decided to release raccoons, and now there are just raccoons roaming around at maybe Berlin, where they never used to live before. Pretty interesting. Urbanization also influences demographics, and this is kind of a fancy word that means the ratio of males to females, the population growth. We're probably now more familiar with the term demography and demographics because of all the COVID-related news. But demography is a study, a field of study that's really important to wildlife and ecology. And so in this classic example of urban ecology, we find that over time, turtle populations have been losing all their females. And so a lot of populations now are just a bunch of old males wandering around. And so it still looks like there are plenty of turtles walking around, but as you decrease the number of females year after year, eventually that's going to lead to a problem, and reproduction will eventually cease, and those populations will slowly die out. This is kind of a really tricky problem because we still see turtles, and so people don't think there's anything wrong. But turtles live a really long time, and so it's going to take a while before we really start noticing even more declines. And so this is a picture of a snapping turtle, which is particularly susceptible to urbanization, and it shows exactly why. Turtles have to leave the pond to go lay their eggs, and doing so, they often cross roads, and I think everyone has probably unfortunately seen a turtle dead on the side of the road, but it's a huge problem. This is really cool too. So urbanization can influence the distribution of wildlife. So on the left here, you have or my left, you have a mallard, and on the right, you have a black duck. We don't have black ducks here usually in this part of Illinois, but along the East Coast, mallards have been taking over the range of the black duck. They're a very closely related species, and female mallards prefer to breed with the beautiful green-headed male mallard. And so mallards have been really, really good at taking over urban ponds. I'm sure everyone has seen a mallard in a pond here in Dekalb or Sycamore. They do really well there. Black ducks don't do really well in ponds. And so what we've seen over time is that the number of mallards has increased, the number of black ducks has decreased, and hybridization between the two is partially responsible for that decline of the black duck. And then finally, urbanization influences the behavior of animals directly. There's been a global trend towards nocturnality. And so animals that live in and around cities, regardless of whether or not they're an elephant in Namibia or a coyote in Chicago, are increasingly nocturnal in areas where there are lots of people, whereas they might previously have come out during dawn or dusk, or even during the day. They've now completely switched their behavior to come out at night, and that's to directly avoid people. Really, really cool stuff. And if anyone is bored during their shelter in place, I would highly recommend the Netflix series Nature After Dark, or I think it's called, and it's a documentary all about nocturnal animals, including these elephants. It's really, really a lot of beautiful cinematography. And so for my dissertation, what I just finished up was looking at a lot of the different influences of urbanization on wildlife up in Lake County, which is the county north of Chicago. One of the projects I looked at was how prescribed fire, which is a common management tool over in that area and in the Dekalb area, how that influences blue-spotted salamanders, which we don't have in Dekalb. We have tiger salamanders, but they're similar. I also looked at the status and activity periods of carnivores. So again, looking at that shift towards nocturnality, as well as just what species occur in the forest preserves over in Lake County. And then I looked at more specifically at how roads and urbanization are influencing the turtles in Lake County. And I'm not going to talk about these specifically. Instead, I'm going to focus on more issues germane to the Dekalb area. But I just wanted to kind of give you my background in urban ecology. And so now I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I've been doing in Dekalb. So from the time I defended my dissertation in March and now, we've all kind of been stuck at home, right? If we've been um, deemed non-essential, right? Um, but I've been kind of bored and I wanted something to do with my daughter. And so what we've been doing is going out and surveying the wildlife across the forest preserves and city parks in the Dekalb Sycamore area. And so I think this is a perfect thing to present to you guys because I've just been doing it for fun. Um, and now everyone will get a chance to see uh, some of the pretty amazing and awesome wildlife that we have in DeKalb. And maybe in the future you can better appreciate what you see, or this will kind of inspire you to buy some cool animal books on Amazon, or if you're able to get them from the library, try to do some more learning, or maybe go out with your kids on a hike and have a better appreciation for what you might see, or is there but aren't seeing because it's not 2 o'clock in the morning. So just to give you some perspective, this is a map of the DeKalb Sycamore area. Um, let's see. Cursor's not working. Okay. If you look at the top center of the screen, you'll see Sycamore, and then as you work your way down, you'll see DeKalb. And down, let's see. All right, I labeled them for you. So these are just some of the preserves. I've been doing informal wildlife surveys with permission from the appropriate agencies who run these properties. If you look up north towards Sycamore, we have the Heron Creek Estates, Old Mill Park, Sycamore Forest Preserve. You're working our way down back towards DeKalb. We have Brothers Park, which is technically in Sycamore, and then PA Nearing, which is in DeKalb, County Farm, which is behind Target. Beautiful hidden preserve that not a lot of people know about. Highly recommended. Cats Park, which is where the dog park is. Hopkins Park. And then the campus of Northern Illinois University. Prairie Park and Lions Park, south of NIU. And then the 2 Rotary Parks. I only have the one in Sycamore highlighted. So these are just some of the preserves that I've been working with my daughter to survey and try to document the biodiversity. And so there's a couple ways that scientists will do wildlife surveys. One of them, we do track and sign surveys. And what this means is we do a lot of reading and we try to memorize and practice what the tracks of different wildlife will look like. So we'll look in our field guides and we'll say, all right, this is what a mink track looks like. We try to memorize the characteristics, and then we go out and where we think the appropriate habitat is, and we use our eyes and our ears and our nose sometimes, and we just try to see what evidence we can find of past animal activity. And so this first image here, these are mink tracks. Mink, just like what if you had a rich grandparent had a mink coat. I'll talk about mink a little later. So we can find footprints in the mud. Here in the center, this is coyote poop, or what we would call it scat or spore. And basically what I found is that there is coyote scat everywhere in every forest preserve. And basically what it looks like is the size and shape of dog poop, but instead of being brown, it is full of hair and little bits of bone, and usually from rodents or rabbits, or occasionally roadkill deer, and occasionally feathers. But that's one of the ways you can tell coyote poop from dog poop is it has feathers or fur in it instead of dog poop. And then one of the other things that we can look at right now are the remains of where turtles decided to come out of the water and lay their eggs. So this is a picture of a snapping turtle nest that I found in Hopkins Park just last week. If you look at the top of the picture, there's a hole, and then on the bottom, there's the hole. So that's where the turtle dug a hole with her back feet, laid a bunch of eggs, and then went back to the water. And then if you look down here, there are a bunch of eggshells, and this is where a raccoon or a possum came upon that nest and dug it up and ate all of the delicious eggs inside. And so these surveys are some of the ways that scientists go about figuring out what animals live where without having to spend the time or money on traps or expensive equipment. We just use our brains and our eyes and our ears. And it's really fun, and there are lots of really cool books that you can either get from the library or purchase for not a lot of money that you can look at with your own family or friends, and it's a really fun hobby. Another thing that we like to use are, sorry, another thing like we like to do are visual encounter surveys, which is a euphemism for going around and just trying to see animals with our eyeballs. Um, and again, if you're trained in what to look for, when and where, this can be a really effective way to find wildlife, particularly reptiles and amphibians, which are otherwise hard to spot. Um, and so on the left, I have a handful of plains garter snakes that my daughter and I found at Prairie Park, just along the side of the road. About 10 or 15 people had previously walked by and didn't see them. And I actually heard them first. And you hear the once you get used to it, you can hear the distinct sound of a snake versus a frog versus a cricket versus the wind. And we were able to capture a bunch of these snakes, and my daughter helped me let them go. Another thing you'll often find just by using your ears and eyes are northern leopard frogs. About this time of the year, they like to hang out in the fields around ponds. And if you're walking through the grass, you might see something scurry away, and there's a good chance it's not a rodent, but it's actually a leopard frog. And then often you can just go and walk around bodies of water and either use your binoculars or your naked eye and just look to see if there are different turtles that are sitting on the side of the river, the side of the pond, or sitting on logs. And there's a couple of species in Dekalb, and I'll talk about those briefly in a little bit. So these are visual encounter surveys. And then probably the most fun and one that I've been particularly, or I've been spending a lot of time doing, are using camera traps. And so what a camera trap is basically just a little camera that you can tie to a tree, and then an animal walks by and it takes a photo. And then you can come back a week, a month, 2 months later, and then take the memory card and see what animals walked by. And this is a really, really fun thing to do. If you're going to do it on public property, such as a park, you need permission. But they're also really fun to use on your private property. And so this is my helper. She likes helping me put out these cameras. The way they work is really, really cool. So you take your little camera. They cost about anywhere from $30 to $500. You can get really, really good ones, or you can get cheap ones, or you can get decent ones. So I have a bunch of decent ones. And you're going to put it on a tree where you think an animal might walk by, and often that is a game trail, which is usually where deer have walked through the woods so much that it forms its own trail. And then it shoots out these little invisible lasers. So I made them red here, but in real life they're invisible. They're infrared beams. And if a warm-blooded animal, like a mammal, walks by and breaks the beams, think Mission Impossible when they're trying not to touch the beams of light, then it will trigger and take a picture or a video, depending on how you set it. And using this technique, I've been able to get evidence of mammals. And mammals are something that are often the hardest thing to sample using visual encounter surveys or tracks and sign surveys. Just because mammals are so secretive and they almost always come out at night, and they occur at low densities relative to reptiles, birds, and amphibians. And so using these 3 different techniques, I've been able to come up with a pretty comprehensive list of wildlife in the Dekalb area. And now I'll share that with you. All right, so what do we find? Right away, whitetail deer, one of the most common species. I found it in I have found it in every single preserve I've sampled. I'm sure you have seen them walking along the road at dawn or dusk. Maybe you've hit one with your car, unfortunately. Maybe they've eaten your flowers. Or maybe you've just seen their footprints or poop as you're walking through a forest preserve. They occur everywhere, and whitetail deer are actually extremely economically important. They provide, I think it's something close to over $100 million to the Illinois economy every year from just deer hunting. Historically, whitetail deer were not super abundant, and through because we no longer have wolves or mountain lions to eat them, coyotes do not do a very good job at controlling the deer population, despite what a lot of people think. And so now we have an overpopulation of deer, And unfortunately, the major cause of mortality for deer is either death by car or death by starvation during really harsh winters. Um, and in the Dekalb area, we don't really have a lot of issues with starvation like they do elsewhere because we have so much corn and soybean everywhere. So what this means is we have a ton of deer and so much that they're overpopulated, and unfortunately that means there's lots of ticks and there's lots of disease that goes to the deer. Um, and so deer are something that our local governments often spend a lot of time and money trying to figure out because they are economically important, but also cause economic damage to other people. The common raccoon. The raccoon is one of my favorite animals, and it is the animal that I have found most on my trail cameras. I have about 14,000 images of raccoons sitting on my hard drive at home, often because a raccoon will decide to walk in front of the camera, and then walk back in front of the camera, and then back again, and then it will walk up to the camera, and it will feel it with its hands, and then it will smell the camera, it'll lick the camera, it'll bite the camera. So they're very curious, but they're also absolutely everywhere because they've adapted to not only eating human garbage, but living in human areas. They'll live in attics, they'll live beneath decks. They're a really interesting creature, but they're absolutely everywhere. There's as many raccoons as you think you've seen until you put a camera out at night. You have no idea how many there are. Similar to the raccoon is the Virginia opossum. So the possum is also one of my favorite animals. As you'll come to realize, I'm probably going to say about everything I show you is my favorite animal because I absolutely love wildlife. The possum is the only marsupial native to the United States, and their populations are actually expanding northward because they do so well in urban areas. The further north you go, you will see more and more possums with frostbitten ears and tail tips, and that's because they're not adapted to this cold weather. They're actually really a southern animal, and there's a lot of different species of possums that live in South America. But the Virginia opossum has decided it's going to do whatever it wants, and it's going to come north, and nothing's stopping it. And what people have actually found is that Virginia opossums in urban areas are larger and have smaller home ranges than possums in rural areas. So they do better in urban areas than they do out in the wild. And possums are kind of silly. The average lifespan of a possum in the wild is about 1 year. But in captivity, they can live from up to 10 or 12 years. So they're just not really good at surviving in the wild, but they do really well in our urban areas where they can eat our garbage and find shelter underneath our decks and our sheds and things like that. We also have a ton of squirrels, as I'm sure you're all aware. What you might not be aware, though, is that there are two distinct kinds of tree squirrels that live in Dekalb. Most people just think there are squirrels, but there is the gray squirrel and the fox squirrel. And this is something that I think people are always blown away by because they can go their whole life, 60, 70 years, and not realize that there are two different kinds of squirrels in their own backyard. I love watching squirrels, and once you know that there are two different kinds, they're two completely different species. It's not like there are, a Labrador Retriever can come in yellow or black or chocolate. No, these are completely different species of squirrel. The gray squirrel is all gray. Sometimes they have a little hint of yellow on their tail, but their arms are gray. Their belly might be white or gray. And then there's the fox squirrel. The fox squirrel is about 50% bigger than a gray squirrel, and it has orange on its ear, orange on its legs, and orange on its tail. And when the sun hits a fox squirrel tail properly, it is absolutely beautiful. So I will challenge you to, every time you see a squirrel, take a second look and try to see if you can figure out if it's a gray squirrel or a fox squirrel. And when you do that, you're going to be blown away. And from now on, you're going to look at squirrels and you're going to try to figure out if it's a gray squirrel or a fox squirrel. And then you're going to start noticing that they act differently and live in different areas. So sometimes you'll find gray and fox squirrels under the same tree or in the same backyard. But often you're going to find fox squirrels in areas that have fewer trees. Gray squirrels like a lot of trees, and fox squirrels like few trees. And the final thing I'll say about these guys is that even though gray squirrels are smaller than fox squirrels, they're more aggressive and they will push fox squirrels off the best nuts. These guys are really awesome, and I would seriously encourage you to look more into our two different tree squirrels because they're really, really cool. Um, then we have the snapping turtle. We have snapping turtles are probably the most notorious turtle that we have here in the DeKalb Sycamore area. They occur in almost every pond and every part of the Kish, but people usually only see them when they decide to leave the water and try to cross a road to lay their eggs. And unfortunately, as I described earlier, this is really bad news for snapping turtles, and they get hit by cars a lot. Um, the good news is that they're really hardy, and oftentimes the car crash doesn't kill them. And good Samaritans can then take that snapping turtle, if they're trained in how to handle them, and bring it to a rehab center. And rehabbers can do a really good job healing up even completely smashed shells, as long as the insides of the turtle is okay. There are also 3 other species of turtles in the DeKalb area. There's the painted turtle, the soft-shell turtle, and then there is a map turtle, but the red-eared slider. And those are the other turtles that you might see, but the snapping turtle is the one people notice the most because it can be the size of a volleyball or bigger, and it's often seen on the side of roads. If you ever see a snapping turtle stuck in the road and you don't know what to do, feel free to send me an email. My contact information will be on the last slide. And I will either come get it for you or walk you through how to safely move it off the road. No one should put themselves in danger trying to move a turtle off the road, but it's always good if you can do it safely to help them across the road. And your best bet is to move them in the direction they're heading, assuming there's no fence there, because if you just put them back on the side they came from, they're gonna do what they want. They're turtles. They're stubborn, and they're gonna just do what they want to do regardless and cross the road a second time. There are also about 7 species of frogs and toads in DeKalb. I played a series of their different calls and songs that they make. Can anyone else hear? Someone said they lost their audio. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, so hopefully that person can figure it out. Sorry about that, but maybe you can look at the recording later on. So there are 7 species of frogs and toads that we can find in the city limits of DeKalb and Sycamore. And I don't really have time to talk about all of them because if you've ever been to my Master Naturalist class on reptiles and amphibians, you know I can talk for 2 hours about frogs and toads. What I will say is that my daughter's favorite is the American toad. And at 2.5, she's pretty good at catching them by herself now. And we'll see if the audio works, but this is what they sound like. Most people have heard this sound calling from about late April through mid-May on warm, humid nights. They don't know what it is. Maybe they think it's a bird. Maybe they think it's a robot. I don't really know. But most people have no idea this is a toad singing beautifully. So let's see if we can get the song to work. Can you guys hear that? I can hear it. No, were people not everyone was able to hear it? That's all right. If you're interested, I will be more than happy to send you an email with the way that sounds. Oh, some people are saying they can hear that. So maybe our audio settings are a little different. But yeah, please feel free to send me an email, and I will put you in touch with how to hear what these beautiful frogs sound like. Striped skunks are found also in almost every forest preserve, and most people have run across them at some point, usually when they're dead in the middle of the road. The reason that is because unlike other species that when they see a car, they do their best to get out of the road. Unfortunately, skunks have kind of an inferiority complex, and they think they're the toughest thing on the block. And so usually when a skunk sees a car coming, instead of running away, it turns around and tries to spray the car. And that doesn't end well for the skunk. Skunks are, again, one of my absolute favorite species. I spent a year in southern Illinois catching them and putting radio collars on them and following them around and seeing where they go, what they ate, and where they were sleeping. I never was sprayed. If you do it carefully, there are ways to catch skunks without getting sprayed. They're absolutely awesome little animals. They love to eat insects. Most people are not aware of what they eat, but they love insects and worms. Um, and Skunks are just they're great critters. Sometimes people don't like them on their lawn because they can dig stuff up. But if you have a skunk on your lawn, it's either eating worms, which is fine, but it's often eating grubs. And so if you see a skunk in your yard, it's doing you a favor because chances are it's getting rid of those big grubs that are causing brown spots in your yard. So assuming you don't scare it and it sprays, a skunk is really your friend. Um, and people don't like having skunks under their shed, and rightfully so. But what I would say is that your best bet is to wait till a skunk comes out at night. So skunks will leave their den at night, and then board up the hole where the skunk is going in and out. Don't board it up during the day because then you'll trap the skunk in there, and then it could die under your shed, and then your shed will smell of dead skunk. So don't do that. Uh, so make sure all of your skunks are out. I recently consulted with one of the properties at DeKalb County Schools earlier this spring. They were having skunks under one of their buildings, and the animal control company trapped, I think, 3 or 4 of them out of there. And while I put one of my cameras up, and there were still about 3 more skunks under there. There were 7 skunks living under that shed. So it's important that you do your due diligence and maybe invest in a camera trap because they're really fun and also useful if you have skunks living under your shed. We also have beaver. Not, I think people in the country know that we have beaver, but if you live in city, you might not realize that we have beaver all throughout the Kish. People don't realize it because they're really good at hiding. Beaver are skittish around humans in urban areas, but they're pretty much everywhere. As is their smaller cousin, the muskrat, which a lot of people confuse for beaver. But it's about the size of a possum, and it swims around. Just the other day, I saw one at Mason Park, and they're really cool. They build little grass houses in the middle of the water, and they act like little beaver. Muskrat are very cool. I'm sure there are birders in the audience, and some of my professors are ornithologists. I'll let them talk about birds. I'm not really a bird person. I'm more of a mammal, reptile, and amphibian person. Suffice to say, there are some turkeys in the Sycamore area, fewer in the Dekalb area. What's really cool about turkeys, wild turkeys, is that they were completely extinct in the beginning of the 1900s in Illinois, and any turkey that you ever see was part of a reintroduction effort that took place in the 40s, 50s, 60s, up to the 70s, and more recently even in the 90s and late 2000s. I don't think they were ever reintroduced in DeKalb. If there's anyone who was around back then, feel free to correct me. But so these turkeys were reintroduced from Virginia, from Texas, from Arkansas, and they were reintroduced down in the southern Illinois, in central Illinois, and northeastern Illinois. So it's really a conservation success story. A lot of people think that an animal that's hunted in the United States is one that's going to go extinct, but it's usually the opposite. And usually, I don't personally hunt, but people who do hunt, whenever they buy a hunting license, that money goes directly to fund conservation and buys habitat for those species. So if you ever see a wildlife on state land, you can usually thank a hunter, even if it's that trade-off between harvesting an individual and maintaining healthy populations. It's a very nuanced subject. We also have rabbits around here, and but a lot of people don't realize they're a special type of rabbit called the eastern cottontail. And the eastern cottontail is a really cool species of rabbit because it tolerates urban areas. In a lot of other areas, a lot of other species of rabbits are not able to handle urban areas. And almost every species of rabbit, except for the eastern cottontail, is declining across the country. They're even suffering from a virus different than COVID that people are worried might start impacting eastern cottontails. And so it's important to develop baseline data for even these common species because you never know when something's going to come through that we might not expect. Groundhogs occur. I think people are most familiar with these if they dig under their shed, get into their garden, eat their plants, or if they're riding their bike along the bike trail towards NIU and one darts across the road and you almost hit it. Groundhogs are really cool because they are actually a type of squirrel. They're a giant ground squirrel. They're in the marmot family. Um, they're really cool animals. Um, they don't act like a squirrel, but they're just big giant squirrels with short tails. Very cool animals. We also have there's two species of snakes that you can find reliably in DeKalb in the city. There's about 5 species that you can find in the area around DeKalb. Um, Again, I could talk about snakes for 2 hours, so if that's something you're interested in, send me an email and maybe I can set up just a snake talk for your organization. But what I will tell you is that there are no dangerous snakes in DeKalb. There are no snakes that, if you were bitten, could send you to the hospital. We only have harmless garter snakes, water snakes, fox snakes, milk snakes, but no rattlesnakes. There used to be a species of rattlesnake called the swamp or prairie rattler, and what scientists call the eastern Massasauga, that used to live in DeKalb County. But someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last Massasauga was killed almost 60 years ago, in 60 years ago in DeKalb. Um, there's one species of snake called the fox snake that will rattle its tail, but that is just a defense mechanism that does not make it a rattlesnake. A rattlesnake actually has a physical rattle that it can shake on the end of its tail. If you ever see a snake on your property, send me an email, and if I'm available, I will come move it safely out of your property for you. Or I can, if you send me a picture, I will tell you what it is. But there are no dangerous snakes in DeKalb. They might be scary, but they're not dangerous. Fox are really common in DeKalb. I like fox. They do really well in urban areas because they're really afraid of coyotes, and coyotes hate foxes. And so there's a really nice population of red fox throughout DeKalb. I've seen them in almost every forest preserve, and it's one of the things that I think we should consider ourselves really fortunate to have here in DeKalb, because in a lot of places in the Midwest, foxes are declining. We also have a really nice mink population. I love mink. Again, they're their own topic of conversation, but a mink is basically just a small weasel that lives in the water, and it hunts along the shoreline, and they love to eat frogs and crayfish and fish. And this is the species that people used to hunt or trap and make into coats. People still trap them legally in a way that doesn't hurt their population. So again, it's that balance between, unfortunately, removing some individuals from the population, but in exchange for keeping a healthy overall population. Nowadays, the mink that are unfortunately killed and turned into coats are usually from fur farms and not wild mink. Instead, the wild mink that people catch are usually sold overseas markets. Coyote, everyone's favorite topic of conversation. Coyotes occur in every single forest preserve and every piece of open space in DeKalb. And if you have a big backyard, I can almost guarantee that you had a coyote at one point in your backyard. Where I live, which is right over by the Jewel Osco by Hopkins Park on Sycamore Road, we've even seen coyotes walking down our street at night. Not in anyone's backyard, just walking down our circle and then heading back to the forest preserve. I'll talk more about coyotes in just a bit. And then finally, we have the American badger. They're known to occur in DeKalb. I was not expecting to see any badgers in DeKalb proper, but just this spring, I got many images of a badger that was living in Lions Park. Not Prairie Park, not Afton, Lions Park. And there'll be a short little video at the end for those who want to look at that. But I was blown away that we still have badger. I'm sure we don't have a breeding population of badgers within the city limits of DeKalb. Badgers have large home ranges, but instead, what I'm assuming it was either a young male that was dispersing out from the prairies or farmlands into the city, or an animal that just was traveling and found a good spot to hang out. There's actually a really good little natural area in Lions Park by the river. But so always keep your eyes out, because what you think might be a raccoon or a possum at night might be a badger. I was blown away and super happy to see that badger. There he is again, or she. Actually couldn't tell what it was. All right. So there's just a couple minutes left, and what I wanted to do was just briefly touch on coyotes because this is something that everyone is always interested in. Uh, because coyotes are kind of this mysterious animal, and there's a lot of misinformation on the internet and in our next door groups and our Facebook groups. And so I thought I could kind of just illuminate these creatures and give you a better sense for what they do and what they don't do. This beautiful coyote, this was uh, County Farm Forest Preserve, which is that little nice forest preserve behind Target. Um, Even a little green area like that is going to have a coyote in it. Not at all times, just passing through. But coyotes are a fixture, and there is a breeding population for sure within the city limits of DeKalb. Um, this is another really gorgeous coyote with its winter coat. This was on NIU's campus over by the Convocation Center. I love this photo because if if I didn't tell you this was a coyote and you were not someone who's familiar with coyotes, you might think that's a wolf. And that's because coyotes in the winter develop this beautiful long fur. Um, it's just a stunning, stunning animal. Uh, this is another really, really pretty animal. It shows the difference. So this is a perfectly healthy coyote. This was in Old Mill Park over in Sycamore. Um, the difference between this animal and this animal is that this was taken in May after it shed its fur. So think about the dog. I have two dogs. I have a lab and a blue heeler, and they blow their coats, right? And so anyone who's ever had a dog blow its coat knows the difference between a winter coat and a summer coat. Well, coyotes do the same thing. And so people will see coyotes in the winter or in the summer and think it's sickly or has mange. But this is just a healthy coyote. It's actually female. You can see her teats are enlarged because she is actively nursing a litter. Um, Coyotes and foxes do get mange, and I've seen some on my cameras. Um, but you can always tell a mangy coyote because it will look like a chupacabra. It will have no fur or patches of fur missing. This is just a healthy summer coyote. Um, I love this photo. This is a really interesting looking coyote. One, you can see its belly is absolutely full. I put this camera on a dead deer that I found. There was just a dead deer in the woods. Coyotes don't really kill very many deer here in Illinois. They do more up in the north. But here in Illinois, they're scavenging on deer mostly. So this was a dead deer that coyotes probably found. Um, Look how full its belly is. This thing has a ton of deer meat in its belly. And see how its face is all white and its legs are white? This is an old coyote that, just like your dog at home gets gray on its face, this is a coyote that has just been doing really, really well and is old and happy and eating dead deer. This was actually not in the city itself. This was up at Kishwaukee State Fish and Wildlife Area, or the Potawatomi Woods, the Forest Preserve side. Um, and then it's important to let people know that coyotes live in small groups. Some people call them packs, but it's not. When people hear the word pack, they think 10, 20, 30 animals, I think. It's not. It's usually a male and a female, a breeding pair, and that year's offspring. So coyotes will have their offspring in the spring, and then their pups will stay with them as they grow up as teenagers and become young adults, and then they'll leave either that first spring, that first fall, or a little after, um, or sometimes they'll stay together. But you're in Illinois, you're not going to see packs of any more than 6 coyotes. Um, Usually, it's going to be 2 coyotes, and they're going to defend their territory. Um, what you will, though, see is that there are packs that defend territories, and usually it is a single forest preserve or big green space. And then there's going to be transients. So once those juveniles are kicked out of the pack, they roam around by themselves until they find an area where that pack has been hit by a car or a hunter shot, or not a hunter, but well, maybe a hunter or a landowner shot the coyotes, or the coyotes died of old age, and then they'll find an empty spot and they'll take that territory over. So there's a really interesting social dynamic of coyotes on the landscape where you have your packs defending a territory and then these young individuals trying to find a spot where they can kind of move in. Really, really cool. Um, this is one of the two um, male and female pair that live in PA Nearing. They're these really beautiful blonde color. Um, This is the other one that lives in pioneering. Um, I'm speaking definitively, but really what I'm doing is guessing based on all the camera trap photos. You can tell when you see the same two coyotes moving together because they sometimes they're unique looking. These two happen to be very unique looking, and so I'm able to tell. Oh, when I see the same two animals moving around the same forest preserve over a period of weeks or months, I can infer that that's the pair that maintains territory. Um, this is again that blonde one. This was a little earlier in the year. And then, so finally, I just wanted to give you an example of what kind of space coyotes take up. So this is again a map of the pioneering area. So you can see Bethany Road, and you can see Cats Preserve, Cats Park down in the bottom left, and you can see the target area and the golf courses. So that green outline is pioneering forest preserve, which many of you have driven by, and hopefully some of you have taken a hike in. This is where that pair of coyotes live, and people have done studies across the country, and what they found is that the average home range of an urban coyote pair is about 2.5 square miles. And so what that looks like is this circle. And so those two coyotes probably patrol pioneering and the golf courses and maybe venture into Hopkins Park. And so those two coyotes defend that patch of green area, and then there's probably any number of transients that walk through that area as well. And so those transients, though, can move really far distances. There have been some really cool studies, and some animal damage control people have put radio collars on coyotes in St. Charles, and those St. Charles coyotes have walked from St. Charles all the way to Rochelle, passing through Dekalb. And so while these resident coyotes that maintain a territory can hang out in a small area, those transients can go everywhere. And so that's why if you have coyotes that you think are causing a problem on your property, shooting them really is not going to solve the problem. One, because you don't know if it's a resident or a transient. Two, if it's a resident, a transient is going to quickly move in within a period of weeks and take over that empty territory. Or three, you're just removing a transient, and so that it was never likely to stay there in the first place. And so there are ways to deal with problem coyotes that involve hazing, and so basically you scare them. And so if that's something you're interested, there are resources. You can contact me. You can contact your county extension. You can contact the nuisance control operator. But shooting coyotes does very little to reduce the population or reduce problems. And then I like to show this picture. This is a coyote we captured in southern Illinois that got a radio collar. Coyotes are small. I mean, I'm a big dude. I'm 6'3", so it looks pretty big. But the average coyote in Illinois weighs under 35 pounds. Under 35 pounds. Usually people will compare them to a German Shepherd, and that's because they look big. They have long legs, and they see them from a distance, and they're a little startling if you see one during the day. But coyotes are small animals. My blue heeler weighs 45 pounds. That's 10 pounds more than the average coyote. So that's not to say we should treat them like cuddly little puppies, but it's just to put that into perspective. And then finally, I think this is my last slide. I figured that most of the questions will involve issues like this. So I instead of going into each one in detail, I'll just kind of go over them briefly. And if you have a question, feel free to ask about this or send me an email afterwards. When you're trying to deal with problems that backyard wildlife cause, first put yourself in the shoes of that animal. And if you're having trouble doing that, reach out to an expert or go get a book from the library or on Amazon about that animal and research it. I would caution against relying on Google because Google can give you bad results just like good results. And often it's hard to, if you're not an expert, tell who's giving you bad advice with confidence versus good advice with trepidation. So keep that in mind. But think like a critter. So skunks, like I said earlier, they come out at night. So don't cover up that skunk hole on your shed during the day because you're just going to trap that skunk in there, and then you have a skunk trapped in your shed instead of out of your shed. So wait till it leaves at night and then cover up that hole. Finally, please don't feed wildlife. Everyone does this at NIU, but please don't feed the ducks, the geese. That causes disease. It can directly harm the wildlife itself, and then it makes them not afraid of people. And you want wildlife to be afraid of people, because wildlife that are not afraid of people cause problems with people, and then people call nuisance control operators, and that animal gets removed permanently. Keep your pet food inside. If you're going to keep dog or cat food outside, take it in at dawn or dusk. You're less likely to have a raccoon or possum come eat your dog or cat food during the day. So I know some of you, I'll never be able to convince you to keep that dog food inside, but at least keep it inside at night. And that'll solve a huge number of problems. Or try to convince your neighbors to take in their pet food at night, at the very least, if you're not the one in directly control of it. Finally, as a wildlife biologist, I have to say, please keep your cat inside. If you don't want your cat to get eaten by a coyote, keep it where there are no coyotes, and that's your house. That can be difficult for some people, but I would just encourage you to do that. Maybe just because there have been studies that show that outside cats live about 5 years on average, but we all know indoor cats can live 15 years. So for the good of your cat and for wildlife, please keep your cat inside if you can. And then finally, supervise your small dogs. If you have a big dog and it's on a leash with you, coyotes are not going to give you a problem. If you have a small dog left in your backyard by itself, even if it's tied up, and it's the breeding season for coyotes, which is early spring, you might have a problem with coyotes. And the best thing to do is just bring your dog inside. I know that's easier said than done for some people, but that is really the only thing that you can do, because a coyote can jump a 6-foot fence, and as I said, you can shoot as many coyotes as you want. A new coyote is going to take its place. So just keep your dog inside or on a leash, and that'll solve 99% of your problems with dogs and coyotes. And so with that, I know I went over by a couple minutes because I can, talk forever about wildlife. I think there might be a short 1.5-minute compilation of some of the wildlife that I saw at a single location at Lions Park. But feel free to contact me on Twitter. My handle is @wild_ecology, at my website, johnpvanek.weebly.com, or shoot me an email, johnpvanek@gmail.com. You can also Google my name if you didn't write these down, and I think it's probably, you can figure it out from the email that you found this talk at. And one of the greatest ways you can help wildlife is by telling experts where you see it. So if you see wildlife, take a picture and either upload it to iNaturalist or send me an email, and I'll do my best to help you figure out what it is and put it in context. So that's I think all I have. Thanks, everyone. I'll shut off my mic, but I don't think I can hear Judy. I don't know if anyone else can.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. Certainly hope you heard my introduction. Anyway, some questions and comments are coming in right now, and I want to thank you, John, for your wonderful presentation, and everybody, I'm sure, loved all the pictures that you shared with us. So we're just going to give you a couple of minutes. You can refresh your drinks and put in some comments. But as you can see, John, can you see them, that there already are some questions that are coming in? So we'll just give you a couple more minutes. John, did you say you had a video to play?
Yeah, I think there should be a short video of just a lot of different critters all at.
And you have that uploaded? So do you want to play it as soon as we come back here?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it got uploaded to Adobe Connect or not, but I wonder if I could share my screen and play it.
Maybe you can. We can't hear you, John.
You guys do that?
Your voice is too low.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay, there's no video on it. I mean, no sound on it. But were you guys able to see that video that I brought up? With the screen, at least?
Not yet. You see somebody's pant legs.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that working? Okay. This is all one spot over about a week. There's the badger. I was so excited when I saw that. He's just looking around, not a care in the world. Doesn't care that he's at Lions Park. Here's a raccoon checking out where the badger was. There's a mink. Here's a gray squirrel. That's some sort of thrush. It's a bird. There's a sparrow. Another gray squirrel. That's a brown thrasher. That's a really cool bird. That was a little wren, a type of bird coming out of the hole. Another gray squirrel. That's a groundhog. Here's a possum. There's our friend the skunk. You saw him drag its butt on the ground. He was scent marking. There was a deer just growing his antlers. There was a cardinal. Another raccoon. I told you they're really curious. They just love to mess with the camera. Okay, so yeah, that was what I wanted to see. I hope everyone was able to get that. So that was kind of like a compilation of best hits over a couple of weeks. Usually, what it involves is looking at hundreds of images and going through and entering data in a spreadsheet. But so that was those are some of the fun things you get to see. While a lot of times there's nothing on the camera, it's just a blank image, or grass blowing in the wind. But hopefully you guys were able to enjoy that while you were thinking of some questions.
Can you take it off now, John?
I don't think I have the option to remove the share my screen panel.
Yes, the questions are underneath it. Okay, it's gone. All right. Before we go to the Q&A, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, our next STEM Cafe will be on July 15th at 6 o'clock. And our topic is earthquakes and fracking. And we're going to have two professors from NIU Geology Department, Phil Carpenter and Megan Brown. And it will be 6 p.m. Again, it will be virtual. And so please join us then on July 15th. I'll also say the date for STEMFest, October 31st. And so we'll be sending out information in a few weeks about that. And then also we have many STEM camps planned and happening right now. I think there was over 25 virtual STEM cafes that have been developed, and we actually have some scholarships for students in Dekalb and girls and students of color and other areas. They're needs-based, but we do have some available, and we would certainly like to get some young people involved. So please email me if you know of any young people that would like to be involved in summer camp. Let's move on to the questions. Are you ready, John? Okay, here's the first one. I heard that the gender of turtles before they hatch has been impacted by global warming as the temperatures are rising. More turtles hatch as females, with fewer male turtles hatching.
Yeah, so that is a real phenomena. So what's really interesting about turtles is the temperature that the egg is incubated at determines whether the turtle is going to turn into a male or a female. Unlike other species that have genetic sex determination. So what's basically what that means, or the implications of that are, as we know that the world is getting warmer in most places, and particularly in urban areas. And in the lab, you can certainly easily make more female turtles than male turtles by raising the egg at a warmer temperature. What's less clear is if that's happening in the wild, because usually turtles are pretty good at selecting where they're nesting. So this is actually kind of like a really hot topic in ecology right now, and people are really trying to figure out if global warming or global climate change is impacting turtles in the wild, because we know theoretically it should, and that in the laboratory it can. So now it's about obtaining evidence and seeing how that's playing out in the real world. It's a really, really interesting phenomenon.
Thank you. Here's the next question. Is there a brand of camera trap that you recommend? How much do they typically cost?
Sure. I don't think I would be able to recommend a particular camera because I've only played around with the brand that I bought. And so I have high praises for this. It's the Browning Strike Force Pro. And that cost about $150. I bought them not with my own money, but as part of a scientific study, and now I get to use them after the study's over. What I would say is that there are lots of great cameras at different price points, from anywhere from $30, $40, $50 up to really expensive. And there are good websites out there that do a good job comparing the different brands, because there are ones with lots of bells and whistles and ones that are bare bones. And so it's up to you and your budget to determine what you want. But there are some great resources, particularly a website called trailcampro.com does great comparisons.
Here's one. I noticed that even when a skunk hasn't sprayed, it still stinks. When you smell one, how far away can they be and still smell?
So that's a really great question. There's two answers. So a skunk that has not sprayed does not usually smell. It actually smells very clean. If you catch a skunk and then anesthetize it and then bring it up and look at it, it doesn't smell at all. And that's because skunks don't like to get their spray on themselves. And so that's why they pick their tail up really high. And often, if you catch a skunk and keep its tail down, it won't spray because it doesn't want to get stink on its tail. What happens, though, is that stink is a compound that's made up of volatile oils, and it's kept in a little gland near the tail. And so when a skunk is hit by a car and it loses muscle control, if it didn't spray the car in the first place, it loses muscle control, and then those volatile oils are exposed to the air, and that's why it smells. So that's when a dead skunk will smell, and you can smell that for hundreds of yards, if not over a mile, depending on weather conditions. The other time, a skunk will spray defensively. Sometimes they'll spray a little mist, like you scare it, and then it lets out a little fart, basically, and it kind of mists the air. The other time is it'll spray directly like a water gun. And depending on how those go about happening, depends on how long and how far you can still smell that.
This
really
same person said that they noticed that they were eating grubs on the lawn, and people are appreciating your advice. Let's see. What is the purpose of a coyote? Is it coyote or coyote?
So, there's actually a really, I'm sure if there are any linguists or students of history and culture in the audience, they'll appreciate this or might know of this. But there's actually, you can say coyote or coyote, and they're, depending on where you're from, an urban or rural area, depends usually on if you say coyote or coyote. Usually people from the country say coyote, and people from the city say coyote, and there are geographic trends on that too. Interestingly, I feel that wildlife biologists who study coyotes usually say coyote, even if they're not from the country. Maybe they're more in tune with the animal. But you could get into a whole linguistics talk on the difference between coyote and coyote. Great question.
And the questions and answers will be recorded. Somebody had a question about that. Let's see. Getting some compliments here, John. Okay, here. Do coyotes respond to pressure on the population? Example, shooting, the way feral hogs do, in that it increases reproduction rates?
So that's a great question. Thank you, Erin. What that question refers to is the fact that there are some species where if, let's say, a feral hog, which is like a wild pig for those who aren't aware, and let's say a predator eats all of their babies because, I don't know, the parents did a poor job or they got unlucky, and say like a wolf eats all the baby pigs. Well, then the parent pigs will immediately or quite soon come into estrus, and they will mate again, and they will quickly have a new litter, and in some cases more offspring than they had in the first litter, and that's a response to that predation event. Well, we can simulate that with shooting. So if people down south where feral hogs are a problem will shoot feral hogs, what will wind up happening is they actually increase the rate of reproduction because those animals are responding to that pressure. And there's some evidence that coyotes do the same thing. So in the past and in some areas, unfortunately today, people will find coyote holes and they will pour gasoline down it to remove the pups. I obviously don't endorse that behavior, but that's a thing that happened in the past. So if you do that, then yeah, you can definitely induce those coyotes to have a brand new litter, and oftentimes that litter will have more pups in it, or maybe not often, but can. And so you can just trigger more and more reproduction. And the same thing. So if you remove an adult from that territory, a new transient, maybe this transient is then immediately going to be mated by the remaining male in the territory, or another transient male, form a new pack, and you might just have more coyotes on the landscape. So indiscriminate shooting is usually not an effective way to remove populations of coyotes or feral hogs. It has to be more strategic and large scale, cooperating with many, many landowners over hundreds and hundreds of
I hope everybody can hear me. Are you hearing me? Okay, do fox and gray squirrels breed successfully? Yes.
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. I'd be happy to look that up if you. I will forget otherwise, but if you send me an email, I'll be happy to look that up for you and find the answer. I would say it's not impossible. And I'm sure it's happened in the past. I can't be sure, but they're closely related. However, what's really interesting is that a lot of species of wildlife, even if they live in close proximity and they physically can hybridize, usually there are behavioral mechanisms that prevent that from happening. And what I mean by a behavioral mechanism is that usually the two species don't like each other, and so they would rather be caught dead than reproducing with each other, even if they theoretically could. So yeah, I'd be, if you send me an email, I'd be happy to
Can
look
you see
into
this
that.
question, John? They want to know how to sign up for the herpetology talk.
So that is a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical herpetology talk. I've given them in the past for master naturalists, but if you would like me to come talk about frogs or snakes or turtles or anything else for your book club or any other group or organization, I'd be more than happy. Just send me an
Susan,
email.
no, I didn't see your question about coyotes. Send it in again if you can. Oh, okay.
Oh, that was the one. What is the purpose of a coyote? Oh, I don't remember if I answered that one. Well, I think that is a philosophical question. You can answer ecologically. The purpose of a coyote is to be on the landscape and eat rodents and rabbits and remove carrion from the landscape, and to provide competition for similar-sized carnivores. So that is kind of the ecological role of a coyote. From a human perspective, many people enjoy the thrill of hearing a coyote howl at night. It makes them feel alive and like they're in the wilderness. People love getting the chance to see a coyote when they're on a hike. Again, it adds that sense of you're really in nature and you're a part of nature. Other people find that coyotes are a nuisance. So that's really a philosophical question that I don't.
This person has a comment. They evidently attended a business seminar several years ago titled Coyote Thinking, and it taught them some unique thinking about business practices. As coyotes moved east, some bred with wolves and became more aggressive. On another subject, any ideas on how to get rid of chipmunks under a back porch?
So one could say that another role of the coyote is to provide inspiration for entrepreneurs and business leaders. Certainly, people have written about them and they've been popularized in the media, and I'm sure have provided economic value that way. Coyotes. So I kind of mentioned behavioral isolation and behavioral ways that coyotes species separate out and prevent hybridization. Well, wolves absolutely hate coyotes, just like coyotes hate foxes. And a wolf will kill a coyote in its territory. What happened as we humans killed wolves along the eastern United States is that the last remaining wolves took over. Sorry, I'm back. My internet cut out. Can you guys still hear me? Or am I back?
Yes, we hear you now. We hear you now.
Okay. So we killed all the wolves back in the 1900s. We were unable to kill coyotes. Coyotes are too smart and they breed too quickly. People tried to kill all the coyotes. It did not work like it did with the wolves. And so the last remaining wolves couldn't find any other wolves to mate with. And so some coyotes took that role. And so if you look at coyotes up in the Northeast, in New York and in Maine, in Ontario, you'll see that there were hybridization events that happened 50, 60, 70 years ago as coyotes moved into that area. And today you will still see that the coyotes in that region have about 10% wolf DNA. They're very much coyotes. They're still under 40 pounds. They're a little bigger than the coyotes we have here in Illinois. But there's really not any indication that they're any more aggressive. They're still just coyotes that are 2 or 3 pounds, 4 pounds heavier, and maybe like to eat deer a little more. But that's very much a northeastern phenomena and not something that we have to worry about in Illinois. On the subject of preventing chipmunks from getting under a back porch, you're going to have to find the hole that they're going into or the space that they're going into and try to cover that up. That is a little outside of my expertise, but I'm sure you could find some resources somewhere that would give you some more specific advice. But I would advise against using rodent poison because the last thing you want is to have a dead chipmunk festering in the hot sun under your porch. So try to find a different way.
Okay, what is your recommendation for minimizing the damage caused by squirrels and chipmunks?
Yeah, so it looks like this is a common theme, and I would say that last year I captured and removed about 20 chipmunks out of my garage, so I understand your cause of discomfort. For squirrels, it really depends. Squirrels can cause damage to trees, to gardens, but they can also cause damage to a house if they get into the attic. They've made some really cool new devices that I think you can order on the internet that allow you basically find the hole where the squirrel is getting into your attic or barn or whatever. And it's a device that works by it lets them come out, but it prevents them from getting back in. So that way you don't have the problem of trapping a squirrel in your attic again to die and then rot in your attic, which no one wants. So I would look into these squirrel excluder devices. They might make a smaller one that works for chipmunks. I'm not aware of that. But you can also buy small live traps and trap the chipmunks using apple or peanuts as bait and then remove them outside and then try to figure out, once you stop trapping them in your house or shed or garage, try to figure out where they're getting in and block that hole once you know they're not stuck inside. And there are professionals who deal with this that you can contact as well, although they tend to use more lethal methods than I might.
Woodchucks bore holes in the levee along the Kish, and they weaken the levee. When I trap them, how far away do I need to take it to release so it doesn't come back? Oh,
yeah. So that is there's a lot more to that question than there might seem. This comment is absolutely correct. Woodchucks love to dig holes in that levee. And I'm not an engineer, so I'm not sure if they weaken it or not, but I'll take your word for it. The problem with trapping and relocating an animal like a woodchuck is that if you take it too far, or if you don't take it far enough, it's just going to make its way back, which I'm sure you're aware of. I'm not sure what that distance is, but if you send me an email, I'd be happy to look that up and look through the literature and find that out for you. The tricky part is, and this is also another philosophical question, is so if you take an animal too far from its territory such that it can't make its way back, that might be a death sentence for that animal because it doesn't know the territory and it might not be able to find food, or there might be other woodchucks in that area that are going to prevent it from living or fight it. Or it might just try to make its way back and get hit by a car. So it's kind of a philosophical debate as to whether or not trapping and removing is even humane in the first place. But that's up to an individual to decide. And like I said, send me an email and I'll try to find that distance for you.
Here's a question about the cameras. Does the camera turn on with movement or is it on all the time?
So that's a really good question. It's not like the webcam that you might have in your backyard that is constantly recording. It's not like a body cam. Instead, it will only trigger if an animal walks by it and triggers that capture event, walks through that laser. That said, some cameras you can program to take a picture every minute. So it's not streaming live, although if you want to spend several $100s or maybe up to $1,000, there are new cameras out there where you can actually have it take a picture and send it to your cell phone. They're really, really cool, but they're kind of expensive, and they can even hook up to your Wi-Fi if you want one in your backyard. But I can't afford those.
I have heard that most places have either the fox squirrels or the gray squirrels, but they tend not to overlap in small territory. Is that true?
That's a great question, and that tends to be the case in wilderness, in natural areas. So if you go out outside of the city limits, there will be areas where you're going to see gray squirrels or fox squirrels. The further west, you're going to find, as you head towards, say, the Rock River and Rochelle, you're going to see more and more fox squirrels and fewer gray squirrels, because gray squirrels like lots and lots of trees. As you head east and you start getting into the suburbs, you're going to find more and more gray squirrels. What gets really interesting is in these urban areas where there's plenty of resources and squirrels never go hungry, because we have all these beautiful hickory trees and oak trees and even maple trees that squirrels love to eat the nuts and seeds of, there's enough food for them to coexist. And I can tell you that I have gray and fox squirrels that live in the same bur oak in my front yard. And I see them squabble all the time. And so the gray squirrels almost always win. When there's a nut that the fox squirrel has, they'll just chase the fox squirrel away. So that's a great example of how in urban areas the behavior and ecology of these animals can change. Great question.
Here's a question. Can you tell me the benefits of having raccoons or possums on our farmette so I have a better appreciation for them? Also, I have some animal living underneath the concrete floor of our Morton building. Once I figure out which animal it is, I'm assuming a groundhog or skunk, how do I lure them into a live trap?
So that's a great two-part question. I would say the benefit of having, well, there's a difference between raccoons and possums, I would say. So raccoons, I think they're just one of the smartest, most amazing animals that are out there. If you put a camera out and you ever watch what a raccoon does, you will be amazed by their intelligence and their ingenuity and their curiosity. They are so stinking smart. It's just amazing. And there are some great YouTube videos of, if you type in smart raccoon, you can spend hours watching the antics that raccoons get into. They're overpopulated, and so they're oftentimes they can cause problems, and so that's an individual decision you'll have to make as to whether or not you and it doesn't have to be contradictory, right? So you can both deal with the damage they cause and still appreciate them for being the rascally buttheads that you have to deal with. For possums certainly cause fewer damage to a small farm than raccoons. Possums can still eat chicks and might kill a chicken or two every now and then. But possums also are really useful. A lot of people have heard this, that they eat a lot of ticks. So some animals, they have a tick that crawls onto them, and then like your dog, right? Dogs will get ticks, cats will get ticks, and then the tick bites the dog, and then it drinks blood and falls off and breeds and makes more ticks. Possums are really, really great at pulling every single tick off their body, and they just eat it. And so there's some cool studies that suggest that if a possum walks through your backyard, all the ticks that jump on that possum are then no longer reproducing because the possum is going to eat them. So possums are great. And then if there is an animal living under your...
Looks like we lost him again. John, I hope you come back. Because I don't know the answers to these questions. John, we lost you. I think give him a minute. I think he'll come back.
Sorry.
We're hearing you now.
Okay. Sorry about that. That internet.
I'm glad you're back. I don't know the answers to these questions.
If there's an animal living under your porch, it's going to be hard to figure out what it is without seeing it in person. But fortunately, groundhogs and skunks are super easy to trap. Groundhogs you can trap using peanuts or peanut butter or apples, and skunks will go after marshmallows. They will go after a can of sardines, a can of cat food. Those are good baits to try to trap them. But if it is a skunk, be careful when you're trying to get it out there, because they will spray when they're in the trap.
You seem to find the badger sighting an exciting event. Are badgers unusual in this area? Also, do I have to worry about the groundhog that lives in my yard?
So yeah, I was amazed. So badgers are a species that has made a great recovery in Illinois. Um, they were on the decline, and it was one of the first species that the Department of Natural Resources told people they were not allowed to hunt or trap because the numbers back in the early 1900s because their numbers declined rapidly. Badgers are really great to have around. They eat a lot of rodent pests, um, and they are important for prairies because they turn up the soil and help aerate it. Um, so, and they're not that common in areas of agriculture, and they're certainly not a species that we associate as an urban backyard animal. So I did a little research out at Nachusa grasslands where there seems to be a decent number of badgers, which is great. Um, we still don't really see them anymore in the Chicago region, although they used to be there. Um, and so I was thrilled to see it because they are not common in DeKalb County. I think the Forest Preserve staff has seen one at Russell Woods before, but they occur at low densities even where the habitat is good. And so farmland and urban area is not good badger habitat. So any badger you see is a treat, and I was thrilled. Um, I would generally not be worried about a groundhog. They can be a little aggressive if you corner them, but most people are are not going to be quartering and chasing around a groundhog because the groundhog is going to go right into the hole. They can certainly bite, so I wouldn't pick them up without experience. And if you're going to use a trap, make sure you're doing it properly, or you consult an expert. Um, Theoretically, they're one of the few rodents that's been known to harbor rabies, but they're not a major concern as a rabies vector. But basically, just like any other animal the size of a cat, the same way a cat can bite you, don't pick up wild animals. I wouldn't pick up a groundhog, but if you're not going to pick it up, I wouldn't worry about it from a safety standpoint.
Okay, do we have wild hogs in DeKalb County?
So that's a great question. We certainly have a lot of pig farms, and I'm sure pigs occasionally escape. But as far as I'm aware, we do not have a breeding population of feral hogs in DeKalb. Uh, there are certainly populations in Missouri, and they've been working really hard to keep them out of southern Illinois. Um, but no, we do not have wild breeding populations of feral hogs in DeKalb, very fortunately, because they are certainly a nuisance and not a good thing on the landscape.
Can you tell us a bit about the small mammals, mice and voles that are found in the area?
Sure. I haven't had much personal experience getting to know those critters because to study them, you really need special traps, and those traps require a permit. And they usually don't give you a permit if you say you're just curious. Usually, you need to have a good scientific reason. So I haven't had a chance to do that. What I will say is we certainly, incidentally, I've seen we have what we call white-footed mice and deer mice, which are small rodents that like to live in the prairies and grasslands, as opposed to the house mice that live in our house. The mice you usually find in your house are introduced from Europe and Asia, and their name is technically actually house mouse, as well as if you see a big rat, a rat is also a species that was introduced from Europe or Asia. Brown and black rats. Um, Voles, we certainly have meadow and prairie voles, which are really cool species. There's actually a decent population of voles that live in the big field by the Kish and the Engineering and Business Building at NIU. And I'm sure anyone who's taken their dogs to run out there has dogs try to catch them. They like to make tunnels in the grass, and they love that dead grass called thatch. Um, um, I'm not sure if we have harvest mice in DeKalb. I know we do in some of the other areas around here. There's also something which is really cool called the 13-line ground squirrel, which what they used to call the leopard squirrel back in the day. It's this beautiful little ground squirrel. It's the size of a chipmunk, but instead of being brown with white and black stripes, it's kind of a tan lion colored with these black and white spots, or in a striped pattern. Absolutely beautiful little ground squirrel. I love them. I've only really seen them in the Sycamore, outskirts of Sycamore, but I'm sure they're in the DeKalb area too. They don't deal with urbanization as well as our chipmunks, which obviously from the questions lots of people have problems with. And then the species I'm really interested in is the southern flying squirrel. So most people don't know we have flying squirrels in Illinois. It's exactly what it sounds like, kind of. It's a squirrel that lives in trees. but glide. It doesn't fly, right? But they have a big flap of skin between their legs called a patagium, and they literally will glide between trees at night. They only come out at night. They're nocturnal, and the only time people see them is usually if it lands on their bird feeder, and someone is looking at their bird feeder at night for whatever reason. I know people. There is a record of flying squirrels in Oregon, Illinois, so I'm sure they're in the woodlands along the Rock River. And we actually catch a ton of them up in Lake County, and they're in the Chicago region. They're in Cook and DuPage. They like woodland. They like trees. I don't know if we have flying squirrels in Dekalb. That was actually one of the things I wanted to look into before we had this whole global pandemic. But that's certainly something I've been interested in, and I might try later in the summer when my second daughter, gets a little older, and my wife and I have a bit more spare time. But yeah, I'd love to find a flying squirrel in Dekalb. It would be really, really cool finding.
Our next question. I have 2 8-year-old kids who attempted to listen tonight. They want to know the best places to find toad and frogs. We are in rural Polo.
I'm not exactly sure where that is. I will say I find toads every single time I go to Wilkinson Renwick Marsh, which is right around Clare, which is northeast of DeKalb. I will almost always find a toad there. I found one today when I went there this morning. I almost always find toads at Hopkins Park. If you walk the trail by the river that's covered with trees on the northeast side of the park. And I find toads actually breeding in the lagoon on campus at NIU. But if you would like to send me an email, I'd be more than happy to try to look at a map and try to point out some spots where you should be able to find a toad close to your house. I'd love to do that.
Ever since I talked to you, I have been finding all kinds of them in my yard for some reason.
It's a good year for toads.
Is it? Anyway, this person has a question about a permit, and it might have been related to an earlier question that you had. Is there need to have some permits for some of this?
Sure. So it's usually a good idea. It really depends what you're doing. So you don't need a permit to put a trail camera out. But if you're on private property, you don't have to do anything other than get permission from the landowner. On public property, you don't necessarily have to get an official, like it's not like you're going through a permit process but you want to have something usually in writing with the agency who's running that property, because otherwise they're going to find a camera, or someone's going to report a camera, and then they're going to call, and then someone's going to go check it out, and they're going to say, what weirdo is putting cameras in the woods? I have no record of this. We need to investigate. And then 1, you're going to lose your camera. And 2, it's kind of rude on someone else's property to just put cameras without getting permission. So you always want to get permission if you're going to put cameras out. If you are catching reptiles and amphibians, you need to have a fishing license. Don't ask me why. That's a idiosyncrasy of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, why a reptile counts as a fish. But if you have a fishing license, you can catch reptiles and amphibians. And then I don't know if you need a permit or not to remove nuisance animals from your property. I suspect you don't, assuming they really are nuisance animals. But it doesn't hurt to check on the Department of Natural Resources website or contact your extension official for those rules.
Okay, our next one. We see raccoon families come out of a sewage drain along our busy street every evening over several years. Do you think they live down there or just use it as a travel path?
That's a great question. My wife and I see the same thing. It's really funny to see them go in and out of the sewer. I don't think they live down there. I think they're using it as a travel corridor. Most of the time, a raccoon is going to be denning in up in the air. So they're going to be in a hollow tree, or they're going to be in some other, or maybe even a debris pile or an old log on the ground. So they're probably using the sewer as a really traffic-free corridor. But I don't think they're sleeping down there. Although they might be.
How can we attract toads to our backyards?
Um, Everybody loves toads. Toads are great. I love them. Unfortunately there really isn't a great way to attract toads. Toads have a pretty small home range, so what'll happen is if there happens to so toads breed in the spring in usually temporary bodies of water, but usually or shallow bodies of water. They'll breed in puddles, little marshes, ditches, um, the shallow edges of ponds and streams. Um, but once they lay eggs, then the tadpoles hatch from the eggs, and then the tadpoles turn into little baby toads, and then the toads disperse from those wetlands. Unless you have an area where the toads are already breeding, it's unlikely the toad is going to find its way to your property. Uh, what you can do though is to just make if you happen to be near an area where you think toads might live, either you hear them or you saw one. Um, your best bet is to don't cut your lawn super short. Let your garden overgrow. Keep little pools of water around for them to stay cool and little places to hide like logs. Unfortunately, those things kind of are also great for mosquitoes. So uh, your best bet is really to just find a place that's near toads and see them there. Other than making your yard hospitable to toads, unless you're into that thing, and then that's cool. I can't convince my wife to do that, or my landlord. But,
How prevalent is rabies in bats in our area? We get a couple bats who make it into our old house every year, and I would rather catch them with a net and release them than have animal control uh, take them.
um, yeah, that's a really so the prevalence of rabies in bats is low. I don't quote me on this, but I think it's about 1%. But it's high enough where you should never really handle bats. You should always let a professional do it. If you're not going to follow that advice and you are going to use a net to take a bat out of your house, make sure you wear gloves and don't let it touch you. Um, very few people get bat rabies from bats, but it does happen. Um, so um, your best bet is to figure out where they're coming in and keep them out, um, and appreciate them because I love bats and they're amazing. But they're just one of those animals that it's not ideal to hold or to come into contact with. Small prevalence, but not a zero prevalence. I'm not aware of anyone that's gotten rabies from a bat in Dekalb. It's certainly rare, and probably happens more frequently elsewhere because we don't have too many bats here. But that's something I would consult with a professional, and figure out a way to keep bats out. They now make a really cool device, just like the squirrel devices, where bats that are in your attic can get out, but they can't get back in. But it's important to do that at a time when the bats don't have babies, so that you don't have the mom get out and the baby's stuck inside.
We had a bat get in my mother's house in Wisconsin, and a family member was able to grab him with a pillowcase.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not something you're going to expect. So maybe you didn't have a net ready.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly possible, just not something I guess in my professional position I would recommend.
All right. Here is a suggestion. The best way is to open all doors and any window with no screen. Turn out the lights and they will get out in a few minutes.
That sounds like good advice.
That's great. Okay, and I have another question here. Are there any black squirrels in Illinois? There is when we were in Ohio, there was a large population at in the Kent State area. So what about in Illinois?
I don't know if there are any populations of black squirrels, but black squirrels certainly pop up in Illinois. I've seen one in Lake County. I don't know if I've ever seen one in DeKalb. So when you see a black squirrel, that is a color morph of the eastern gray squirrel. And that is a case where they come in color varieties, just like a Labrador can be a yellow lab or a black lab or a chocolate lab. I don't know if the genetics are exactly the same, but it's just a simple color morph of the gray squirrel. And what's really, really interesting is some scientists think that originally the black squirrel was the predominant color morph, and that over time the gray morph has come about as we've changed their habitat, and it became more advantageous to be gray, which blends into the environment better than black, which blends in better in really high canopy forests that are dark and shady. But we don't really have very many of those anymore, so it doesn't pay to be dark and black because you stand out to predators. Really, really cool, but a topic of another discussion.
Here is a comment. In the Quad Cities, Rock Island, there are a lot of black squirrels.
Oh, cool. That's great. There's also there's somewhere, I want to say it's in Illinois. I know there's a place in Kentucky that also has white squirrels. There's a lot of random little color morphs that pop up in squirrels. Very cool.
Only, does that make any sense here? Oh, only Illinois is a place, evidently, that there are black squirrels. And I don't know if there are any other comments, but a final one is that in Wisconsin, when I grew up, they had bats infested in the libraries, and the librarians used to run around with tennis rackets. And I had one come straight at me, and of course they got the sonar, and just before it hit me, it went another direction, so that was quite frightening. But they had them, and they never could get rid of them. And part of the problem was they also had a museum right next door that had a lot of snakes, and so I don't know if they had critters in there that attracted the bats or not. But anyway,
I think we build buildings a little better these days.
And there's a question here about white squirrels. Where are white squirrels?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know they pop up occasionally, and there is that population in.
I think we lost your voice.
Oh.
Can you say something so I can see if you lost your voice?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Anyway, so that is the last question. They say here that only Illinois has white squirrels, and you're getting all kinds of compliments, John. Everybody has loved your presentation, and we have lots of thank yous, and the pictures were fantastic. The video was great, and so thank you very much. I knew ahead of time, since I visit with you ahead of time, that this was going to be a fantastic talk. Thank you, and I want to remind you to tune in to our next Virtual STEM Cafe, which is going to be July 15th at 6 o'clock. It's going to be virtual again, and it's going to be earthquakes and fracking with two of our professors from the geology department. Also, thank you to Aline Click, our NIU Director of Web Media and E-Learning, and her staff, Raz Abdul Surani. And you will find this recorded presentation, including the questions, in about a week, as we need to worry about the closed captioning so that it is accessible for everybody. So both the presentation and the Q&A. People do like to have the Q&A because they learn a lot, and we did learn a lot from your Q&A here. If anybody is interested in sponsoring a STEM Cafe, please do contact me at jdymond@niu.edu. We certainly could use your sponsorship, and thank you very much for joining us. And again, October 31st is STEM Cafe. Not STEM Cafe, is our STEM Fest. And don't forget about our wonderful STEM camps that we're having this summer. And no, it's not the same as going to school. There are a lot of cool activities, and students can go outside and other places in order to do the activities. The materials are sent to families, and so we particularly have several grant monies for students of need, so we certainly want to get the word out and to use those monies to get kids excited about STEM and STEAM. So thank you very much. Again, Please provide your feedback to me in an email if you can, because this is different than our live STEM cafes. We always like suggestions, and we appreciate any of your feedback. And thank you again, John, and Aline and Roz for helping us out the evening. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We really love to have you. Please come back. Good evening. I hope everybody was able to hear us.